there's different components that go into paying this off. You have the principal, but then you have different interest rates, interest rate, and then interest due dates for a total debt service on each year. Again, this is available for everyone to see, but I'm going to blow it up and just kind of make it a little bit bigger and easier to understand different components of it. So going back to 2018, that was correct me if I'm wrong, that was also an August election, but the bonds went out for sale, and they started the bond sale in December of 2018. That original amount was $8.1 million at a net interest of 4.0%. Total debt service on that $8.1 million, originally $13.649 million. Bond term 30 years. So just going through that, this right here is just a grab from that last figure right there up at the top. Oh, right there at the top. And I have no idea why I did all that. Apologies. All right, so when we're talking about that bond, currently we have $7.2 million outstanding on the principal. As of the election date, August 5th, we'll have about $6.995 million still on that principal, and then we have a remaining total debt service of $10.9 million on the 2018. That does conclude in levy year 2048, payment year 2049. So that winter collection of 2048 is when that bond will be paid off, that 30-year bond. All right, so with that 8.1 million, there's a lot of parts that go into this, and I'll just include a few, but there's masonry, there's excavation, there's a lot of other things that aren't on here but are part of each of these pieces. In terms of what we did with that 2018, there was a complete renovation and updating across the entire district. Updated and remodeled classrooms and school facilities. We did flooring, the epoxy flooring that you see both in the middle and the high. We had old VCT tile, it was 6 or 7 different versions of it. Main power line upgrade, we had to do a new power upgrade via consumers, and we had to move our substation connection for that because of the long glass hallway and where that's located. We had to move that. We did new boilers and heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems around the district. We did elementary cabinetry and countertops, updated our classroom furniture. We did lighting across the secondary, and then we had to do asbestos removal in the process as well. Old building, lots of renovations. Redesign, all new secure entryways. The main office addition was redesigned as well with additional offices put in there. We did an activities entrance. Middle school bathroom, they didn't have a bathroom in the middle school before. I say they, I wasn't here at that time. I take your word for it, it wasn't there. They had to walk out of the middle school into the high school, keeping them out of class longer. So in the process of doing that, we had to move where we had our maintenance set up. That was moved down now closer to the kitchen. We did a bus loop out here. Made it safer for students. They were exiting out one side of the building to access the buses, parent pickup on the other side of the building. Redid the front parking lot, and we have the electronics event sign out front. Again, other components were pieces of this, excavation, for example, land preparation, those types of things, but these are the major projects that were included within that 2018 bond. Just a couple pictures to show what we're talking about here. That whole entryway to the main office, that's new. We have multiple of these covered awnings, and then all of these are secured entryways. This is an example of one of the classrooms and some of the stuff that was done. They had all new flooring put in the classroom, elementary, and then they had the new cabinetry and countertops here. Elementary also received new windows and window dressings. This is a picture of our activities area, kind of a highlight area for us. It's a feature area. It's where most of the traffic comes in for evening events. And we also, here, we redid the floor, put a little bit of flair on it. These are all new lockers that were put into the secondary as well. All right, so since that time, we have done other additional capital projects, things that we were trying to do that didn't quite fit into the bond picture, but were additional things that we wanted to continue to do to beautify the school and make it feel more comfortable. We had to put on a new bus barn. We did replacement baseball dugouts, bleacher repairs, not replacements, stadium and gymnasium. Our gymnasium was in pretty good shape, didn't have to put nearly as much money in it. They're old, but they're holding up very, very well. A lot more from a repair perspective in the stadium, to the point where we're needing to do a full replacement. We did a track survey and engineering to figure out exactly what needed to be done. And then we have bus charging infrastructure that needed to be upgraded outside. And then in partnership with the Wolverine Pride Association, we did a stadium entryway. There's two components. You see the larger of the components right there, but then you also have the Wolverine head for the ticket booth area. And then we did hire a dome consultant to do some renderings and get us going on this project. All right, this is a very, very complicated, very, very busy slide. This is provided by PFM Financial Advisors. They've been working with our district for a lot of different things. But I want to focus in on one piece of that, and that is the Series 2025. So this is the feature that talks about just the 2025 bond. It's dated 11/1, August 5th date in terms of the election. You get the results, everything gets certified. It's an estimate that we'll be talking about dating them as of 11/1. The original amount, 11.995 million. The interest is a little bit higher than it was before. That's at a rate of 4.3%. Total debt service on that is 18.7 million. Bond term is 20.5 years. So again, from that first slide, this is showing that this bond is actually going to pay off earlier. If all follows on that timeline, we're looking at a first levy of 12/1, so the winter taxes of 2025. I highlighted the piece down at the bottom. It contains some of the interest information about what we'd be paying across the board. So we have our first principal payments in May each year with interest as well on that, and then a second one, interest due in November. You can see the total line there, 11.995 on the principal, and then that 18,723 over on the other part. So in total, like I said before, these are actually layered on top of each other. They're paid off simultaneously. So the existing and the proposed debt together would be at $29.4 million. That's the two put together. The existing paid off in tax year, the existing bond would be paid off in tax year 2048. The proposed would be paid off in tax year 2045. So similar to if you are using a credit card, there's always a service fee that goes along with it. That's the way the bonds work. These are the bond rates that are in here. They're actually pretty low estimates right now on the growth rate. You can see at the top here, the growth rate at the top, excuse me. The growth rate here at the top is 8.64%. That's what we've actually seen. That is the average over the past 3 years. But for the purposes of going through the bonding process and getting state certified, they don't look at just 3 years. They look at 3 years, they look at 5 years, and they look at 10-year averages. And what they also go through and do is they go conservative. So when you see these 2% growth rates, that's an estimate, but that's a very conservative 30-year average that they throw out there. What happens though is what I'm going to show you next when it comes to millage rates. So I want to talk a little bit about millage rates because that's also come up because there is an ask of an increase of 1.5 mils. So I want to compare for you, show you some comparisons of other Michigan school districts. Now, I truly believe that every Michigan school district is unique. It has its own communities, it has its own unique characteristics, size, taxable value, those types of things. It's important though to understand millage rate, they aren't the same across the board. Different millage rates benefit districts in a different way. So the change over time, millage rates are not a constant. They do change over the life of the bond. As more principal's paid off, more taxable value in your area, the lower the millage rate. So that is a variable rate over time. Dive right in. So this is a little bit of a rehash of what we had before. 1 mil is equal to $1 for every 1,000 of taxable. There are some factors that come into taxable value. So there are exemptions, there's inflation, and there's property improvements. So what you'll see, and in the next slide where we have a comparison to Standish amongst others, is they actually have a lower taxable value. I don't know all the ins and outs as to why they have a lower taxable value, because they have more land, but my guess is that they have more exemptions and property improvement exemptions. So in tax year 2024, the state average debt millage for Michigan was 4.93 mils. That's a combination of sinking funds and debt retirement being paying off of bonds. AGS is currently at 2.35 mils, and the bond proposal would increase us to 3.85. That 3.85 mils would still have us at 22% lower than the average for the state. So doing a regional comparison. Now when I say regional, I think about the Great Lakes Bay area, I think about Iosco County, I think about Aranac County, I think about Bay County. So what I put at the top of it, you can see that we have Augury Sims there as the current, and then we also have our proposed. And you can see going through that different amounts of money are generated in that funds column over here on the right based on the millage rate and the taxable value. These are all publicly published. This is available, this is the representative, rather, of 2024. So I want to make sure everyone's good on that. This is not 25 rates. These are the 2024. And this is a combination of receiving it from Michigan school business officials, that's the millage rate that schools have, and then also looking at the state of Michigan for taxable values within school districts. So just a couple things here. Bangor Township is a much smaller geographical district than Gres Sims. They have a lower millage rate, but it's pretty darn close. Actually, it's the exact same as ours right now. But because they have the same rate, they have a much larger taxable value. They're generating on an annual basis $1.167 million off of that same number of a millage rate. Bay City, by comparison, is only slightly higher than that. But with a taxable value of $2.16 billion, they're able to generate annually through that millage of 2.86, $6.2 million back to the school district. So what I'm hoping you see on this is that millage rate, the number that you have in taxable value, those vary district to district. Lower taxable value necessitates a higher millage rate. Now when you look at, say, Essexville-Hampton, they have the highest in the region at 4.7644. But because their taxable value is so low, they only generate 1.2 million off of that much higher rate. Again, Bay City is about half as that, and they are making 5 times more. Standish, again, has that lower taxable value. It's higher than ours. However, that 2 mills generates about $855,000 right there per year. West Branch Rose City recently passed a bond proposal. They're doing a massive renovation across their entire district. They're at 2.3395 mills, but with a taxable value of $875 million, they're looking at bringing in $2 million a year to pay off that debt levy. I also highlighted Oscoda because when Rich gets up here, he's going to talk about a project that is breaking ground right now. They've started their project up there in Oscoda to build a field house. So I want to point out Oscoda, their millage rate is at 2.6292, but their value, taxable value, is so much higher that they're generating close to $2 million per year from their local community. So one of the common issues that small districts, rural districts do face is that when we're passing proposals, that millage rate is something that's scary to people. And I completely understand that, which is why I wanted to bring that up. The increased number on there is a scary number to people. Now, I also want to show you some like district comparisons. And when I say like districts, I use this with my administrative team to do comparisons on academics, different programs, things like that. And when I talk about like, I talk about 3 different things. I talk about size, so enrollment. All of these districts are plus or minus 10% from where we are. I look at socioeconomic status. What I'm looking at is the poverty rate and how that applies, because that speaks to resources, it speaks to access, it speaks to a lot of different elements. We base our food counts on that, a lot of different things. And then the NCES is something that most people aren't familiar with, but it's a qualification that's given to our school district based on how they classify us for different financial things. We are classified as a rural remote. It speaks to how close you are to major cities, different resources, things like that. We have received small and rural funds as a result of where we are and how far away we are from different access points. So when we have this list up here, they're not necessarily in our backyard, but they have the same, very similar profile to what we have as a school district. So the ones that are highlighted in yellow are all that have currently have millage rates that would be higher than that 3.85 if passed by our school district. And you can see that you have to have these high rates to support the kind of payoff that you want to be able to do something special with what you have going on in your school district, to have that kind of community support. The one I highlighted down here in green is interesting. I mentioned before at the previous community forum that Matt and I, attended Elkton, Pigeon Bay, Port Laker, which collective, that's the name of the whole district. They never call it that, they just call it Lakers. So we visited Lakers because they recently passed a $19 million bond, and they did it in large part to build a community center. Now their community center is not a dome, their community center is a brick and mortar, and it is much smaller. But if you drive through this school district, it feels more rural than we are here. It just encompasses a very large area. It's mostly farmland, and it is a community center that is being used in the same model that we're talking about, but it's much smaller in size. Now, what they're talking about is they've got a 3.58 mill rate right now, but their large land is taxable at $760 million, generating $2.7 million a year. When Matt and I went out there talking with the superintendent and the business director, they're actually going to go out for an additional bond coming up here in the next year or so as well to do some facility improvements, because what they put forward before essentially was what was needed to pay for the Laker Legacy Center out there. All right, I just threw a lot of numbers at you. The big takeaway that I'm hoping that you see is that millage rates are variable, and it has a lot to do with the taxable value of your district. The other part is, I believe that we have been very good stewards of the district's money. We did a lot with 8.1 million. I didn't see it before I took this job, before the construction started. I saw the holes everywhere when I got here. I saw the plywood on the wall and the windows, and there were no ceilings, there were no floors, nothing like that. But I didn't see what things looked like before. I'd heard it was pretty outdated, had that feel, and now when people walk around, it's a place to be proud of. I do believe we've been great stewards of the district's money. And what I want to do is invite Rich up to talk to you a little bit about why a dome, because I truly believe, and our board truly believes, that this would be an extension of being a good steward of the district's money. So, Rich?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Especially the front row. Well, first off, thank you for having me here. So, like Chris had mentioned, my name is Rich Brynick. I'm an architect, project manager, senior associate at the Collaborative out of Ann Arbor. I'm hoping to show you some cool stuff today, and everything I'm going to show you is really comparisons of field houses. So it's interesting, the typology of K-12 is really changing. It always evolves, and lately we're seeing a lot of athletic focuses. Years past it's been academic focus, it's going athletics. We're seeing a lot of field houses start to get incorporated. A lot of the indoor facilities, especially for areas like this where climate may not always be in your favor. So it's interesting where traditionally we've done a lot of field houses on the higher ed front. So some of the examples you're going to see here are more higher ed, and now we're starting to rope in a lot more K-12 for doing these field houses. Traditionally, it's always been more of your contemporary building product. A lot of times it's a pre-engineered metal building structure, like you see a larger warehouse structure go up, and then it has a conventional frame building attached to it. So you'll see some examples of that, and then we're starting to see the domes pop up, pun intended, a little bit more lately with another example with Adrian College, which you'll see in here as well. So please, my name's Rich, ask questions along the way here. I'm very easygoing and I do not mind being interrupted, so please interrupt me. So one of the first examples I'm going to show you here is Alma College. So I tried to put on each of these slides where we show you examples, a floor plan of it. I'll show you some renderings on the next slide. And then we tried to throw a little bit of information in here, and it's really to do a comparison of time when it was built, because you'll have to see these times where they range from 2025 to 2021, and think about escalation and everything that's happened within those couple of year time frame. So I'll throw in your bill. I'll give you a little bit about the actual building itself, square footage of it, cost, and then cost per square foot, because you'll see a drastic difference between these types of buildings and really the cost it takes to do them. So 2024, we've got the Alma College Field House that got popped up. You'll see the area in green is the traditional pre-engineered metal building field house area, with the area to the bottom right being the conventional stick framed attachment to that includes anything from offices to locker rooms, toilet rooms, any of those types of facilities. It was 66,000 square feet, and the total cost of the project was just over $16 million at $245 per square foot of this building. So there's a couple of renderings you can see from that. Pretty cool structure for them. Next one here is going to be, like Chris mentioned, Oscoda. So we're working on this one right now. We've been working with the district for a little bit, and the building is being built. They had gone really looking at doing more of a traditional field house with the pre-engineered metal building being the area in green, and a conventional building off the front of it. It houses a lot of the same functions as Alma that you had just seen previously. When you look at this, it's just over 24,000 square feet at $8.1 million, which is $336 per square foot of building space in there. And there's a rendering of what that's going to look like. And this one specifically was very similar to here, being more driven as a community center, where it's not just for the schools. Some of these field houses and examples you'll see, they're all school-based. They're not utilized by the public. This is one that was a community center to help drive the community interest and benefit everyone holistically. The next one on here is St. Clairsville. Now, this one is interesting. It's 2025, 14,000 square foot, $2.875 million. So it's $206 a square foot. The thing you'll notice with this is a strategy that a lot of clients will take, where instead of doing that conventional building off the front, they look at doing it as more of just a standard, pre-engineered metal building holistically through the entire thing. So that's building up your frames and really having that out. You can get a lot better cost with doing that, but there's still then all the additional utilities and everything it takes and the coverings for that. So this is a good example of seeing a more simplified pre-engineered metal building structure that's standalone without the extra amenities. And tell me if you can't hear me. Like Chris said, I can't really hear me. It sounds kind of weird up here, so just let me know. This next one's a very cool project. This is the Rossford R Field House, and this is really for mainly the students. They allow some of the community members to use the workout facilities. Well, that's about it. So they didn't put this out for the community. It was built in 2022, metal building area, so the pre-engineered metal building portion is the area in green, with the conventional being over to the right. That house has a lot of different functions, but this is one of the bigger ones that we've ever done, where it's just over 50,000 square feet, and it costs $17.5 million, so that's $340 a square foot for that. It's a mix, and really I should say all of these are a mix of what you're gonna see for the dome that's being proposed, so turf area, sports area, and conventional frame area. So very large structure, a lot of branding associated to it. I think you'll see how this one has a lot of branding on the building, similar to what's being proposed for the dome itself being here. So similar, but a lot less cost on that. All right, so here's an example of a dome. And this is going to be important for when we start to talk about a comparison later on. We're gonna really talk about the comparison between this dome and this Rossford R Field House itself. So talking about this dome, this one's being built right now. So this is at Adrian College, and this is their main field house area. So it is a dome structure, very similar to what's being proposed here. So it's at 128,000 square feet, and it costs $11 million for the project. So when you look at the cost of that, that's $86 a square foot. And it's interesting to look at between the two of, when we go to the Rossford one, that was back in 2022 at $340 a square foot. That's unescalated, so I didn't put an escalation on any of these values. That was what it cost at the time. And then this one that's being built right now is at $11 million, will be $86 a square foot. And it's just the economy of size and really scale of the building that takes that into consideration. So very similar to what you're looking at, we're large turf area, a lot of track space around it, a lot of different events, a lot of flexibility for the college itself. And then here's some examples of that. You've got a couple of renderings to see how it looks on the picture on the top right and the bottom left. I just took those 2 weeks ago. They're inflating the dome, and it was a pretty cool process to see the whole thing going up and actually start to see some of the inside of it. So that's always, if anyone ever wants to visit a dome, a good example. That's a pretty cool one that's just getting finished up right now. All right, so let's talk about you guys. So you've seen a lot of the renderings, the plans, the functionality of the dome, and the previous meeting. I know Chris has been really good about putting information out to the public. Anything we can really offer to help. So what you'll see is it's proposed 2026. We've got all the different areas between the turf area and the sports flooring, the various sports that could take place in this dome, and it's really due to the size. So this one's a little bit bigger than Adrian. It's 135,000 square feet. Now that's inclusive of the entry building up front. So it's about 5,000 square foot for the entry building and then 130,000 for the dome itself. The estimated cost that we're looking at for that is based on the bond dollars is $9.5 million, and that's coming in at $71 per square foot, which is well less than a lot of those conventional type buildings. So when Chris says being a good steward of the dollars being placed into here, it's really trying to think how far can you stretch that dollar to get the largest facility and then make it so it's very it allows for a lot of different uses and allows for being rented out, different things. Yeah.
You said the square footage includes the entry building and that?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, the 135,000 square foot is holistic of the whole thing.
Okay.
And how big did you say Adrian College's was?
Yeah, let me show you.
College
128, I believe. Yeah, 128. And that was inclusive of the entry building and the dome as well. So this one's a little bit bigger.
And that's for a college.
That's for a college. Yes, ma'am.
And how is that funded?
That was through the college itself, so the college uses their general funds for it.
Quite a difference.
It is, oh yeah. This is specific for the college, so they don't allow any of the community members to really utilize it. So a lot of what what Chris has been driving for this one is looking at it for the school, but also for the community, so you could utilize a lot of these spaces and really generate some revenue off of it. So Adrian's not looking to generate revenue off it, they're just looking to have it for their athletes. For here, it'd be looking as a revenue generator as well. And these are just some renderings that I know you've seen those kind of circulating around. Yeah.
Is there a dome that we can look at for high schools?
So for high schools,
Like this?
not that I'm aware of. So,
Okay, so this would be
K-12.
a first.
Yeah, this would be one of the first.
And what's the class of the seniors
This wouldn't be the
in
first
this
in
class?
the country. And there is a dome already. A high school does have a dome down in, it's much smaller. It's their main gymnasium.
Yes,
And it is down, Allen Park. That's Melvindale, North Allen Park.
and what's the class of that,
What's the class of the school?
of the seniors?
Like how many students?
Yes,
Oh, that I don't know. I
and
can
how many
find out.
students are here in all grade?
They're not using it for the community though. They're using it as their main gymnasium. They bought, Baker College, which was
So
their.
we're talking about colleges, not high schools.
No, they bought Baker College to make as their main high school building, but Baker
Okay.
College didn't have a gymnasium. And so, rather than building a brick and mortar gymnasium, they built and erected a dome to serve as their main gym.
So we don't have a dome that you know of that we could compare our dome to other domes?
There's
In
one
high
in
school.
Wisconsin, yes, there is. That we
In
went to.
Wisconsin,
Yep, we
but
did,
not in Michigan?
because they're new.
Oh, okay, thank you,
We could be the first.
okay.
Yeah, and it is different. No, I get that, it is different because it's not your conventional building. It is, hopefully what you see is it's a lot less. You try to build something of this size, conventionally, you're, upwards of $350 a square foot opposed to the $80 a square foot, this is talking about. So it's, the size you're looking at, the amenities, it's probably about the most economic option to get that size.
Was your company instrumental with Skoda, with the field house, and
Yeah, we're the architects of it.
you're the architects for all that?
Yeah, yes,
But
ma'am.
did you try to persuade them to put up a dome?
No, they never.
When you're telling us it's so much more cost effective?
It was never thought about. Really, when we come into it, they talked about wanting a field house and the amenities they wanted for it. Similar when we came in, working on the bond help with all of you, it was, leaning towards the dome itself. So it's not a common practice to do, domes. It is becoming more prevalent as, especially when you get into K-12, as they start to look at field houses, it's really starting to think about the cost for it. So I'm not a dome person, so we don't really have any sway to push anyone for that for any reason, but we are seeing them start to pop up.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think that with the economy and the rising building costs, that there's gonna be more people looking to this type of construction?
I absolutely think so.
I mean, that's what I've heard a lot about, is why aren't we doing bricks and mortar? And I mean, you can see the obvious comparison, bricks and mortar is 3 times plus.
It's a lot of labor.
They don't.
It's a lot of labor. You may get your material costs of, you got the membrane in the dome, the structure holding it in, but getting all the labor of that brick coming up opposed to, inflating this, that's a ton of the savings. Yep.
Do you wanna cover that last one you
Yep.
have there and
Absolutely.
more questions?
So this one was getting into more of a comparison as really kind of utility. And so we started to talk about utilities feeding these types of structures. And so what we have done, I was architect for both these projects, very familiar with both of them, and trying to look at how can we show you square footage versus usage of these areas. So we're looking at the Adrian Dome on the left, the Rossford multi-use facility on the right. You can see year bill, all those stats that you see written out there, that's what you had seen previously. And we wanted to show you is more of what is the actual feed into the building. So you think about gas capacity, we threw in, the way you measure is in BTU, so looking at Adrian's 8.5 BTU, but a lot of that is due to the generator usage. So that's the thing about how much gas is coming to the building to fire up the air handlers to keep it tempered. And then also if something were to happen, power outage, now you need gas to power the generators to keep it inflated for 2 hours so people can exit before it deflates. So gas is higher on the dome facility, mainly the generators, and then when you look at your electrical feed to it, the Adrian Dome is using an 800 amp main distribution panel, whereas Rossford was using a 1600 amp main distribution panel. And so if you think about power, I know like I'm throwing amperage and things like that at you, but when you think about power, it's using half the power that a conventional building would use, for the systems itself in electricity. And really, as Chris had mentioned, there was some comments about capacity within the town and being able to feed this type of building. I think a good comparison is think of, if you build a house, a 2,500 square foot house has a 200 amp panel. So this would be basically about 10,000 square feet of house to get you at that 800 amp comparison system for 130,000 as shown here. So I just wanted to show a little bit of what would be feeding these actual buildings when they get built and erected, and these are two real world examples of what's going into those.
Any questions from her?
Thank you, and I can answer questions through what you feel.
Thank you.
Love the flag, thank you. I never get that.
I've got one quick question. Are you the architect for the renovations within the building itself, within the campus?
So not right now, so not the previous bond. If this bond were to pass, I would be doing any of the renovations taking place that's beyond the 9.5 for the dome.
Okay. So then how did you generate the figures for the renovations of this building? Through another architectural firm?
No, we worked with Hendrick Construction. Hendrick Construction has worked on our campus before. They worked with the 2018.
Very familiar with them.
So Hendrick worked with Rich in the collaborative
Okay.
to come up with the figures, and also Dome Consultant helped us with some of the dome numbers. He has relationships with dome companies. We have talked with a number of dome companies, but we're not interviewing them so much as getting information from them. So it was really the three groups coming together to come up with the numbers. Obviously, the dome consultant didn't have much to do with rooftop units and stuff like
No,
that.
I understand that. I fully
yeah.
understand that.
Okay.
No, it was the brick and mortar or what the renovations versus this, if he was involved with those numbers. So that came basically from R.C. Henry.
Yes, and we've been having weekly meetings that involved Rich's group, R.C. Hendrick, dome consultant in the district for, 4 or 5 months now.
Yeah, we looked at, we helped with, planning. We were working with Chip Hendricks over at RC Hendricks, so I was working with Chip to look at, the plans of what's gonna be taking place. We also have an engineering team behind us who helped with some of the air handler units and figures, for those types of systems, so we oversee that side as well.
But as far as, what is being done, I understand the roofing I asked the last meeting about what roofs are being replaced on the existing campus. Do you have that information tonight?
No, I do not have that information.
So the 45,000 square foot is what just came out of the thin air, or?
No, when they worked on our campus before, they'd given us some preliminary estimates on that, with the eye toward the capital projects that I mentioned before. They'd gone through and they'd noted out of warranty sections. I did not label them. They have them. I can get those. I can have those.
I would be interested in that because I'm the retired maintenance supervisor for 20 years. I know the age of the roofs and what was put on. And I'm interested in what portion of the building is being re-roofed versus what's here existing.
We should be able to show, Tremco, they came out and did an analysis of the roof. They do thermal scans of the roof and they try to look at based on age and where there's, really cool air getting through to show pockets of water build up. So they had done a report to identify the 45,000 square feet of deficiency in that area. That wasn't something we walked around and identified.
Sure, but according to the pictures that were posted on the website, where you show the leaks, we're in the middle school building, correct?
Some of them. We took pictures throughout the district. I mean, it wasn't just one spot where we had a leak.
No, I understand that, but the big issue with the roofs in this complex is the vinyl roofs that were put on in the 99-2000 bond issue. And I don't think you've had any issues with the ballasted rubber roofs on either the existing high school or the elementary building, to my knowledge. And that's just trying to figure out what you're trying to replace for what was it, how much, over $1 million for 45,000 square foot of roofing? That seems awful high, just from my experience.
We'll have that information available for the July one.
Would you?
I'll
Yeah,
get that
yeah,
down,
please.
yep. And then, I apologize, Mike, I know you asked about roofing, I didn't have that exact question, but I did just write it down, so I will have that available for the July.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the existing building. I mean, this community has supported this existing building for 60, 70 years, and they've been good stewards forever. And I don't
I hear
think
you.
anybody has any qualms about what needs to be done here, first and foremost.
I will see if I can get a diagram.
I'd
on
appreciate
that.
it, yeah, please.
I just wanna say, I kinda go along with Mike, you know, these buildings, the original high school was built probably in what,
1948,
1940s?
1948,
And the elementary in the early sixties.
1960 and 1969.
And I believe without the good upkeep and maintenance of our buildings, they would be in much worse shape. We have excellent, including Mike, he was wonderful when he was here, excellent maintenance of our buildings, and I think that's why we're proud of what we got. I mean, I think it's beautiful, and I'm very excited.
I agree, I think we've had great people working here in maintenance, transportation, food service. I feel like we've had great people here, and I've been proud of that fact since I've been here. I'm proud when people come in. We hosted Aranac Community Funds yesterday. I sit on the Aranac Community Funds committee, and because of repairs to our previous location, we've hosted it recently, and even with stuff out in the hallways, because we're starting to clean elementary rooms, one of the first comments I heard when people walked in is, it's just so clean in here. I don't know how you guys keep it so clean all the time, and it's a testament to Mike and the people before him who have put their heart and soul into it to making sure that it's a good learning environment at all times.
Mike trained him well. Thank you, Mike.
Yep, thank you. I have one additional question. To getting into the new facility, are you looking at that area that the school owns between the old hardware and the car wash? Is that what you're projecting at this
Help
point?
me out, what's the old hardware? I'm not familiar with what
Do
the.
you know where the car wash is?
Which one?
Where the canvas
Okay,
place
yes,
is?
okay.
Is between the canvas place and the car wash, is that what you're projecting as the entry to the new facility?
It would be a little bit further back, obviously. It's gonna be behind them, and there's gonna be a parking lot is what we have rendered right now. So there would be a parking lot, so there would be, the district already owns the land between the
Correct.
car wash and the canvas shop.
Okay.
And so there would be a boulevard coming in, and that boulevard would lead into a parking lot, and the entry building would be connected to that, and then the dome connected behind that.
Okay, what I'm asking is the entry point from US 23 into the facility.
Mhm.
You have to enter for some place. Is that on the west side of the canvas place, or is it in between the car wash?
It's between the car wash and the canvas.
It'll never work. DOT shut us down on the original 99-2000 bond issue because one, it wasn't accessible, it wasn't wide enough because there wasn't a turn lane in there, because the turn lane stops right there. So that's a major issue. Have you talked to DOT? Because I was involved with that.
I spoke with county officials about it,
And they said,
and they said they measured it out, and they said that it should be okay.
county officials,
County officials.
You have to get a hold of MDOT though, cause
MDOT.
they're a whole different ballgame than the
Yeah,
county.
they stopped us, they stopped us, because the original one, back before this, the 99-2000, we talked about a bus loop back here, and that was one of the reasons why they didn't go ahead with it, because we had no access, with the exception of what you're using today, off Michigan. So that might throw a monkey wrench into it, because it's not wide enough.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't you mention last meeting that you just bought property for the price of $10,000 behind the bank?
Yeah, it extends behind those businesses. So it doesn't have, the land that we bought does not have any direct access to 23, but we already had the access to 23. Where it's actually right out here. If you go, we have the practice football field out here. That's already ours, and we're going about 10, 15 feet into that weedy area, and that's where the property line is. And we bought 5.3 acres going out, all the way, extending all the way back actually behind Northland.
And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you purchased that in December, this last December?
It wasn't finalized until January, February.
Okay.
Yeah, it was after the new year. We started conversations with them in the fall. They only do quarterly board meetings, so I had conversations with their CEO, just making some inquiries. We met several times in the fall, but I had to wait until the November board meeting that they had, their quarterly board meeting, to go up there to Alpena and present to them. And then decision-wise, we came to an agreement, then that had to be finalized by their board and had to be finalized by our board. So yes, and that had previously sold for right around $30,000 in 1993. So.
And one other question.
Sure.
Can we get the current balance in the general fund? What's in the general fund right now? The current balance?
Current, like, fund balance?
Yes. 'Cause you said you-
Well, yeah, we have our, tomorrow, or I'm sorry, Monday night, we have our final amended budget, and that is 1.9, what's that?
1.9.
Yeah, 1.9 million. Yeah, that'll all be published afterward too. But yeah, our fund balance has been in a good spot. Certainly not enough to do all the repairs we're talking about, and we have to, by law, maintain a certain fund balance. Our board has talked about wanting to be above that, making sure that we're never in that area. School business officials recommend between 15 and 18%, well, 12 to 15%. The gold standard is kind of 18%. And we're gonna be doing a small deposit right now with our final amended budget, but we're looking at a deposit of about 6,000 this year, which is gonna leave us right around 31% fund balance.
And then that property that you just finalized, that 10,000 came out of the general fund?
That is
you
correct.
said. Okay.
Because that money's already accounted for in those numbers.
Okay.
I will point out that 31%, we tend to climb a little bit higher toward the end of our contract, a collective bargaining agreement. We just reached the end of our collective bargaining agreement with our teachers. We have up for approval a new collective bargaining agreement that will be approved Monday night. It's already been ratified by the association. Typically speaking, you see patterns within school districts where you're going to see a little bit of eating into that fund balance at the beginning of it. So your fund balance tends to go down at the beginning of a contract and tends to go back up toward the end of a contract. So it's a 3-year contract that will be sent to the board for approval on Monday night. So I would expect that we'll eat into that a little bit. But I don't know if anyone read the news yesterday, but the House just came out with their budget proposal, and there were some different things on that. So they're pretty far apart right now on a final budget in terms of the executive branch, the Senate and the House. We have to come out with our budget for next year by the end of this month. So we are hoping that the House budget would give us a better idea about where to sit on things, but we do feel comfortable with the collective bargaining agreement we have and being able to sustain whatever comes out from the state budget. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question. The property you were discussing, what is that property for? That you were talking on, that. Okay,
Well,
so
it
the
would be where we
property
would
has
build it,
been-
yeah. So we wanted to
property's
have,
already been purchased.
yeah, and I think I shared in the first meeting as well, maybe I didn't, but even if this doesn't pass, there are potential uses for that property. We really don't have a good access to get out to the baseball, softball fields right now. It gets very congested driving up that service boulevard. Even if the bond doesn't go through and pass, we would look to do something with that land to make it easier to access. The practice football field, it serves our purpose, but on a rainier night, people still park on it because we don't have any other options. And as a result, you end up getting those tire ruts and things like that. So looking at a couple different options for that, but we had built into the design piece having access to the softball and baseball fields as part of the design plan with that land. But up until the purchase of the land, we didn't have the ability to kind of cut through it. So we kind of had to walk around or drive around on the elementary side.
Just real briefly, on your revenue estimates, what is the, membership, sponsorships? Can you just explain that a little bit, how you're getting this revenue?
Yeah, so we've done some studies on other field houses that are around the area. We've done some site visits on that. We have a partner over in New Hampshire who is, they're kind of the reverse model of what we have. They're a private school who's seeking those kinds of sponsorships to generate revenue to build it, but they're able to have operational costs covered. We're the reverse here in Michigan with our funding model, so we're looking at revenue to be able to build it, with the idea that we would use sponsorships and memberships slightly, but that's more of the sponsorship to be able to sustain it through the operational cost.
But what do you mean by membership and sponsorship?
Well, membership would be, for example, we've got taxpayers here. It would be a nominal membership for a key fob to have access, but there would be people who are non-taxpayers that we would say, okay, a monthly membership would cost X. And that's where those numbers are.
Do you have any numbers on that, Chris, at all? Is there any numbers at all that you projected the cost for memberships?
I mean, I put some samples in there last time through, yes.
But there's nothing hard and fast?
No. Certainly, there's nothing hard and fast right now. Really didn't want to put the cart too far before the horse, but we did look around at other places and other examples that were out there and said, okay, this is in that same ballpark. And actually, we went conservative compared to other places and said, no, we want a minimal at most cost for taxpayers on it, but something like someone who lives in St. Tawas.
Yeah.
It's not a hard drive down, someone who lives in Standish.
Yeah.
They're not paying taxes on it, but having a regular membership cost to come in, $30 a month, something like that, to be able to use all that space and different events and all those things, sure.
Locally, for a local person, like a person that lives within the community, you're talking similar, $30 a month?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
So have you canvassed the area to see how many sponsorships you may get or may not get, or no?
We weren't looking for those sponsorships to be things like local businesses on that. There would be a different kind of opportunity. It would be larger sponsors that we'd be looking for. We have been collecting all kinds of information about like larger group sponsors, things like Walmart, Meijer, Ford, things like that.
We don't have a Myers up here.
We don't, no.
No. So why would they sponsor that up here?
They might not, but they very well could. I have reached out, I've been
So
talking
these
with-
figures are just out in the air?
No, there's some
It could be more,
basic-
it could be less.
Correct.
Correct, thank you.
Or not at all.
Or not at all.
Yes, sir.
We're speaking of sponsorships. Our family stopped at the Toledo Dome in Toledo, Ohio. They have one of the large companies that they do all their football there. They do their high school, they do all their, community, their clubs. There they have, they don't have any bleachers, but it's just like, if you go watch your game, son or daughter play soccer at the soccer field, you pull up a chair. He said, the guy says that they use 90% of it most of the time, cause then they have, elementary like Sam's, they're doing flag now, they're doing it outside, they could do it inside.
Mhm.
You know, just the same way as be a sponsorship right there. You know, it's just different places around that could use it to where, oh yeah, well, we have a travel team here, we have a travel team here, we have a travel team here. They can all travel to here instead of going to Detroit, you know, Illinois, or out of state or whatever, like get the money come here, you know,
Okay. Just saying.
I don't think, you know, looking at these number comparisons for a field house versus an air dome, it's easy to see the air dome is much more economically to build. But where is our student count to use this facility when you're gonna play your football games on the football field, you're gonna have your track events on the new track, and you're gonna play basketball in the gym? What is the real purpose of the dome? I don't get it.
Can you expand on that a little bit? I think people are getting hung up with, it's little all gray. Why do we need this huge dome? Well, part of the reason is so we can have some of these events like, the two, people have gone to the travel softball. You have two softball games going on in the same building, you know. You have, AAU.
There's a lot of opportunities
Pickleball.
within travel
We don't
sports
even
for
have
that.
junior
Travel
varsity.
sports are
We
huge.
can't- we can't support
here.
junior
We don't
varsity
have that
teams.
here, but they
We
have
don't
that
have
throughout the
that
state.
It's
here.
not
We
just,
travel to
it's
those
not
places all
designed to
throughout the
be
state.
our primary for our competition, but when we talk about practice
Expand your mind.
and using it for PE and things like that, that would be the primary school use, but it's also a place that could be used for competitions with the weather that we do face around here. Having a conversation, with our athletic director. Our kids played, Chad, how many games you guys played? 22 this year?
Yeah.
Of an allowable 38. And so when we talk about opportunities for kids, and that's just one year, it's one example, but there's an allowable 38 games for the baseball and softball season, and we had more scheduled, but we didn't schedule the full allotment because we're never able to play games before a certain date anyway.
You haven't for years.
Exactly, but downstate, those kids had the opportunity to play 38 games. I was an athletic director in Marine City, and we did. And it's not that far away in Marine City, but they didn't have the opportunity. I coached soccer down there as well. We didn't schedule any games up here before spring break. Down there, you play 5 or 6 before spring break even happens, which means you put your athletes in a situation where they don't have the same equal opportunity to be able to get their stats, get their competition, do that type of thing, or they're in a situation where they can't compete because it's too cold, too wet, whatever it might be. We don't schedule those games, we put them at a disadvantage as a result. Being able to do that, not just for us, but also for the area sports and being able to use that as a revenue generator as well, would be a good thing for our community. We recently hosted the baseball softball districts, and it was a one-day event. One-day event on the Friday of graduation, which is already a crazy day around here, and multiple business, they talked about how busy it was in their business on that Friday afternoon. And that could be in our area much more frequently. It could be around this area generating income and business for our area.
Just a quick question. I mean, I know we can host like, travel softball, travel baseball. The one thing I wasn't sure about, MHSA, do they allow you because of potentially hitting the roof? Is there any limitations that says you can't? Because it's through
No.
MHSA?
There are no limitations on that piece. You'd have to figure out some, like, what your playing rules are. But there are outdoor fields where there's sometimes restrictions on playing rules. It doesn't happen as much in the rural areas, but it does happen more in the urban areas. But baseball fields don't have a set dimension. Baseball and softball fields don't have a set dimension. It becomes like and it even happens in Major League Baseball where in some of those domes, the ball hits the roof and they have a rule in place for that. It just needs to be communicated ahead of time, and that's MHSA's message as well. So they wouldn't be the fee. We'd still want to play our games and do that, but would enable our kids to be able to practice in bad weather. Because you can't do baseball, softball practice in any form that it looks like that sport in the gym. You can maybe do some in the batting cage, you can throw around a little bit, but we just recently had a window broken in the MPR because we had a baseball practice going on in there, and it broke a window. Two windows. It happens, they're gonna be replaced, but that's not the optimal way. And when you talk about just baseball, for example, one of the things you need to do to develop your arm is you need to do long toss. There is only so far you can do long toss when you're in the MPR. You can only get so far away from people. And you can only have so many kids participating at one time too, because you run into a safety issue. And we do the best we can with what we have. What we're offering here is the opportunity for something greater than what we have, to be able to expand those opportunities for our kids, but also for our community. This will be available for others to use, and it's large enough in size to be able to use it for our sports teams at the same time that the community is using it for other things as well. It'll be bringing together the school and the community. Yes?
I just wondered, track-wise, would it be a full track that they could do meets in there? Because I know that both of my level boys that were in track this year had very few track meets because of weather.
Great question. So this one I personally called Cody Inglis is he is the guy who works at MHSA who's in charge of track. And one of the things that we talked about doing was we don't want to have the asphalt track that you see because that takes away from the playing surface. If you looked at some of the models that Rich showed, the playing surface was like half of a surface at, I think it was Rossford, like half of an area. You even saw the Adrian Dome was a 300-meter one, and they had like kind of a flat side. I don't know how running on that would be for track. But what we proposed, what I threw out there, and I talked to Cody, I said, Cody, do you have to have a specific surface? Like, do you have to run on concrete? Does it have to be the asphalt, the rubber that they use out there? It's like, no, there's no rule for MHSAA, there's no rule for National Federation of High Schools for that competition. And I said, well, what if we were to line a 200-meter track on the turf? And just, instead of having it woven into but just line it with temporary paint. He's like, well, you wouldn't run your fastest times. But then before he could even finish that thought, he continued on and just said, but you don't run any times right now, so you'd be able to get some times, some qualifying times, some pace setting times. So it could be a facility that could potentially host it. And I know that Gordy has talked with the league about this, the North Star League, and they just said, listen, you get the first 2 meets of the year. If that thing happens, we want to run there because we want our kids to run. Even late in the track season, I was up at Alcona for that one that took forever. And it took forever because they wanted to get middle and high school in together because they had so few meets this year. It was a very cold spring. And it took a long time, but by the end of that night, which was only a couple weeks ago, it was really cold there too. Because that meet didn't end until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and those kids got up there at 2. So, or saying there's an opportunity there, yes, to be able to push it in because there aren't specifics when it comes to the surface for MHSAA. You'd have to talk about things, so just like Mr. Zion brought up, there would be some modifications. Kids probably haven't they haven't run on a 200-meter track before. They're so used to the 400-meter track. But, okay, instead of doing 4 laps for a mile, you do 8 laps for a mile. And it would be almost like a little bit of a gimmicky fun thing. There's a track meet that I know of that takes place in the Thumb. They have a really unique setup there that actually is a violation of MHSAA because they actually run into the woods as part of their track. So their track is like built into the woods, and they have to have 2 officials because they have to have someone in the woods to watch the runners while they're in there before they emerge back out. But that is a big track event that pulls people from all over the area because it's kind of a fun and different way of doing track and field.
I have a question. What percentage of your student body is involved in athletics and track?
That's a great question.
And then I guess I'd go a step further and say, give me a percentage, and then can you give me a number? You know, like your enrollment's what, 400 and what, 4?
About 415.
I was gonna say 425.
I can get you the exact numbers for the next one.
You don't
But I can
need
tell
to
you,
be, but just
we have
ballpark.
seen a major uptick in our sports participation since COVID, and to the point where we've added teams. Just this past year alone, we didn't allow 6th graders on basketball because we already had 2 teams worth with just 7th and 8th graders. You take that by comparison to first couple of years out of COVID, it was barely making the numbers on it. But now we're filling those rosters up. We had a girls JV basketball team this year for the first time in 14 years or something like that. And the numbers continue to grow with camps, with things like that. The participation's been great. Matt and his wife Becky have been past 2 years rebuilding basketball with youth on Saturdays throughout the winter, to the point where we have to do multiple sessions during the day because it's grown so big and we need more space. When we look at the layout that we currently have configured right now, and you put that in the dome, you've got 2 courts, you've got an older court, you've got a younger court, you've got more opportunities for kids to be able to get that kind of attention, to be able to get out there and play.
Can you give me a ballpark, what you think a percentage would be, 20% of your kids?
We've got about 140 in the high school, I'm guessing I would throw there maybe about a third.
In the middle school, I think the number is higher percentage-wise because
Middle school has a little better.
the majority of middle school runs track.
And I do have one more question, if you don't mind. If, say hypothetically, this is defeated, will you come back to the community for the project K-12 building piece as a standalone issue? Will you come back to us to vote just on that issue?
I think that we would have to.
Okay.
I don't have a timeline, we haven't discussed that, but the building repairs, the K-12 repairs that we have are needs, they're absolute needs. Yep.
Totally agree.
Yep. All right.
I just wondered if there's no regulations on the track, why aren't we using our track?
Well, the track itself is not safe right now. The track outside is breaking up, and that does present tripping hazards and things like that.
Yeah, there hasn't been a meet out there in
No.
15 years.
It's been a while, and it's been ignored. I won't say, as It's nothing on you, Mike.
No,
It was-
I know,
It was
no, the money
district
wasn't
decision.
there to do it.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, we recoded that track and relined it, and that was probably about a 3 or 4 year window after that, that we ran meets. It's been a while, it's been at least 12, 13 years since some meets been out there.
And as a former athletic director, I can tell you, resurfacing of the track is something you need to keep up with. It's something you need to do it's 4 or 5, you might get 6 or 7 years, but then you start seeing some of that wear, and you have to stay with it. So once it's gone, it requires a lot more to get it back to being a competitive track that you can use safely again. All right, last question, and then we're gonna call it an evening. Yes, ma'am.
I have a little bit of a different question, probably for like the both of you guys. So I'm just wondering, like, since an air dome is like highly pressurized and it has to constantly have air running through it, could it potentially like lead to further air pollution and lead to higher exposure levels?
Not that I'm aware of. It's actually a pretty clean environment with the air filtration always on. You have to maintain that air pressure. There isn't, it's primarily run on electricity. There shouldn't be air pollution as far. As Rich mentioned, there is a generator backup. You have to, and you have to perform maintenance on that backup. You have to go through weekly checks just to make sure it's ready to go, just in case. I want to also, while we're on that piece, I think there's a conception out there that if something fails with the power, that it just immediately like collapses in like a balloon. That's not the case. So it actually, if the primary power fails and the backup fails and the doors are closed, it takes something around 10, 12 hours before you start seeing it start to deflate. So there's plenty of opportunity for that the power to come back on, the generators to be working again before anything like that would
You're
happen.
not gonna, that won't be deflated at any point in time.
No, it's designed.
24/7,
It's designed to be
365.
correct. And as a comparison around here too, we don't power down our school.
No.
Yeah, you have to we have some setbacks. We have temperature setbacks where like right now, we don't keep the AC running in all the classrooms the way that we would during this time of year or during the school year. Same.
I don't have AC. You have AC? I worked in a school in Saginaw and we didn't have.
That was actually, it was added in 2020 when we did that
You guys
last
are
month.
very lucky.
And it's not in the hallways, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well,
It
wasn't
is
in our
in the
classrooms.
classrooms. Yeah, and it's nice. I didn't have it when I taught down in Georgia, and it was miserable. It was miserable. All right, folks, well, thank you very much for coming out this evening. Like I said, the next one we have will be July 17th. Mr. White, I will make sure that I'm getting some of that stuff for you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.